Hey, everybody. My name is Dan Weiss. I am the founder and CEO of IGW Coaching. We're an executive coaching leadership training firm, and we help business owners and CEOs build performance culture so great teams can work in the business and they can work on the business. First and foremost, I want to thank Leo and everybody at Leading Peers for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Really grateful. And today, I want to answer the question, what can we learn from the great sports coaches to become stronger leaders? So first and foremost, when we say leadership, what do we mean? So I think of leadership as that uniquely human energy that unlocks the will inside of others to actualize a worthy outcome. So let's unpack that. So great coaches intuitively understand that actualizing a worthy outcome first means they have to define what that worthy outcome means. They intuitively understand that they have to create a compelling mission for the team and a compelling vision for the team. So what's the distinction between mission and vision? Mission is the change that all of your work is going to provide for clients and customers. It's the gift you give them. Vision is that compelling aspiration of what you can become as an organization. It's an aspiration of how much more you can be, how much more you can give. So mission and vision are terms that are kind of thrown about in many areas, sports, business, and they're really, really important. What the great coaches in sports do is the mission and vision are so compelling that their players intuitively realize that it's not just about putting points on the board. It's about sacrifice. We'll talk a little bit more about what sacrifice means later, but in a nutshell, it means that the players realize that the mission and vision are so important and so compelling that they want to give not just to get. They want to give much, much more than would be required just to receive the normal rewards of their role. And it's interesting to note that the word sacrifice comes from the same word as the word sacred. So in other words, great coaches can make a mission and vision so compelling that players want to elevate their performance, not only as a means of putting points on the board, but a means of really doing something greater. Great coaches also intuitively understand that they have to draw out a lot of performance from their teammates, from their players. Much more performance is, so the famous saying that, greater than the sum of the parts, that it's not just about how much skill can we extract from each individual, but it's also about how much autonomy we can build into the team. So that's how we think about capacity. When we talk about capacity at IGW, we mean not only the quantity of skill, how much can people actually execute, but also how much autonomy do they have? So it's not only skill, it's the autonomy that actually scales leadership. Because as autonomy in a team increases, the required leadership involvement decreases. That frees the leader up to be involved in more strategic things. So finally, great coaches also intuitively understand that leadership is an energy. It's leadership is not a title. It's not a spreadsheet. It's not a metric. It's not what you can put on your resume. Leadership is an investment of a very specific kind of energy. So we've already established that the great coaches, they intuitively understand that the mission and the vision have to be bigger than points on the board. So that inspires sacrifice. They intuitively understand that not only do they need to build capability, but also autonomy, and that's how their leadership scales. But how do you sustain that? You sustain it by a consistent investment of a certain particular kind of energy. We call that performance relationships. The best coaches know that in order for the sacrifice and real capacity to be sustainable, they have to invest in amazing relationships, profound relationships with their players. And when they do that successfully, all of those other things that they did, the building of the creation of a mission, a vision, capacity, capability, autonomy, that becomes the culture. The powerful thing to build a performance culture. Okay, so great coaches, we see, elicit sacrifice by challenging players to do more than win. They create capacity, which is the synergy between skill and autonomy. And they understand that sacrifice is sustainable only through deep relationships that transform into a performance culture. Okay, so let's broaden a little bit more into each of those principles. When we think about what we really want from our teammates, do we want compliance from our teammates? I mean, we do. We want them to adhere to processes and to, quote unquote, follow the rules. We don't want a team full of mavericks. But is that all we want? Of course not. We want performance. It's true. We do want performance. We need people to hit their metrics. One of my sales buddies always says sales is where the money comes from. And I would say, that profitability is where the longevity comes from. So we need performance. But is that all we want? I would argue that what we really want from our employees is sacrifice. And again, what we talked about before is sacrifice means giving beyond what it takes to get what you want. It's giving in service of a higher purpose. Sacrifice, we said, comes from the word for sacred. So what we mean is, so I'm not making a religious argument here. What I'm making is a profoundly, I would say, what I'm arguing for is that when we as leaders create such a compelling mission and vision that it inspires people to want to not only hit their performance metrics, but to do more, to elevate their performance into something more profound, that's what we mean by sacrifice. And that's what we really want, because then it gets people to make more independent decisions, and that leads to scale of leadership. And again, when I say scale of leadership, I mean you've got your team working in the business, and you are freed to work on the business and be involved in more strategic things. So here's an example. Now, John Wooden was a legendary college basketball coach, coached championship team after championship team. It's an amazing thing when you hear his former players throughout the decades talk about their relationship with Coach Wooden. They almost never talk about the basketball. They talk about how their relationship with Coach Wooden helped them elevate themselves as men. And so, in other words, what Coach Wooden was able to do was to take the mission and the vision of his team. Certainly they wanted to win games, and certainly they wanted to win championships. That was their mission, was to play great basketball. But the vision that profound aspect of what elevated the mission beyond just scoring points on the board was, who can we become as men on and off the court, not just now, but for the rest of our lives. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a video from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the basketball great, who was a coach, was a player of Coach Wooden's, and has some profound things to say about how Coach Wooden impacted not only his play of the game, but his life and his trajectory as a human being. Another example, Doc Rivers, amazing coach, National Basketball Association, coached many teams in the NBA. And when he was the coach of the Los Angeles Clippers, he, the owner of the Clippers at one point, during a pretty critical point in the season, was caught on tape saying some pretty abhorrent things, pretty racist things. And so you can imagine that challenge as a coach. You're an African-American coach, predominantly African-American team. Your mission is to put points on the board. But if that's all that it was about, imagine how it would have all come crumbling down. In that moment, Coach Rivers' decision would have been simple. the mission doesn't count anymore. The mission doesn't matter anymore. But Coach Rivers had already elevated his vision of what his team could become through the channel of playing basketball, throughout the process of coaching the Clippers, that his experience with that crisis of leadership was far, far different than conventional thinking would have dictated. See, because he had already established that his approach to the game was, how can we play the game without losing our moral core, without losing our souls? And so he was able to elevate that moment because he had already elevated the mission through a compelling vision. So if you click that QR code, you'll see just the most incredible description by Coach Rivers of that moment. In other words, what I'm getting at here is that the great coaches intuitively understand that to elevate the game, it just has to be more than about the points on the board. One last example, Coach Popovich, just one of my favorite stories. And the way he elevated the game above just scoring points on the board was, how can we build community? Amazing stories about how Coach Popovich builds community through the channel of the game. So the game is a platform for building community, not only in the team, but also in the actual community where we play the game. Those people that support us, that cheer for us, that pay their hard-earned money to come, to buy tickets to come watch us play. Great profile in the New York Times about how Coach Popovich thought about culture, about community through the channel of basketball. And you can find that by clicking that, by scanning that QR code. Okay, so we've established now that the great coaches of sports, and there are just endless wonderful stories of coaches who elevate the game beyond just scoring points on the board. And they do that through compelling vision. So we've established that the great coaches, that's what they do. They say it's not enough to score points. It's not enough to win. We have to elevate it into something more profound, something bigger, in order to elicit sacrifice from our players. That extra effort that goes beyond just, I trade you effort and you give me money. The great coaches also understand the importance of capacity, which is the synergy between skill and autonomy. So again, capacity to execute, that's that will inside of others. How much contribution can you squeeze from those players? Capacity to execute is quantity of skill times autonomy. So you take that skill that you build through intentional practice and you attach rocket boosters to it in the form of teaching players how to execute those skills autonomously. That's what scales leadership. That's what takes the effort of execution off the plate of the leader and puts it squarely into the hands of the team. Now, that allows the leader to be involved in working on the business, building out those strategic capabilities, a bigger vision, bigger partnerships, bigger customers. So it's not only skill, but autonomy that scales leadership. So let's take a look at a very common model for building skill. I think this is pretty intuitive. A coach is constantly managing the cycle of skill building that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, assessing training needs, making a training plan, executing the training, and then once again assessing what did we achieve, and now how can we train at a higher level. But the best coaches are also looking for opportunities to teach autonomy, to give players the skills to self-direct, to manage their own work, to give players the emotional intelligence to collaborate effectively as a team, and also the independence to challenge the process, to raise their hand when they think that something isn't working. And finally, to be coachable and to be a coach. So this is a profound point because when the coaching model is done right, other people become not only capable, but they also become coaches. And so, and that's our motto at IGW is our motto is we build leaders who build leaders. This is critical because when you become a leader who's extracting that extraordinary will to sacrifice, and you model the way of coaching to extract that, you're showing people how to do that. And then that becomes the ethos of a team. Not only do I want to therefore become a much better player because I get what the coach is trying to get to extract from me, that extra effort, but I want to look around at my teammates and emulate what I see in the leader. I want to become that coach. Okay. Oh, so the example, the coach that I have there on the right-hand side of the page is a legendary football coach, Jose Mourinho, just amazing, amazing leader. And he once said that his job at the professional level of football is not to coach the individual, it's to coach the team. Why? Because the individual already has that level of skill. Now what he's got to do is he's got to get that team to elevate each one's individual skill so that the sum is that the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts on that football team. Okay, so let's see if we can go through the intuition here of where we're holding with the coaching model of leadership. So what we've established so far is that the great coaches of sports, they elevate the game beyond just scoring points on the board by creating a mission and vision so compelling that it inspires sacrifice, that desire amongst their teammates to give far more than just what is required to receive the reward. We've also established that the great coaches build capacity, which is that synergy between capability and skill and autonomy, the ability to self-manage. So the great coaches also understand that this is operating at a very high level. And as a result, it's only sustainable if we invest the right kind of leadership energy consistently throughout. So what is that? What is that fuel that fuels the sacrifice and execution capacity of a team? And I'd like to argue that it is the profundity of relationships. It's the only way that sacrifice and capacity to execute are sustainable at that high level is through deep relationships. And I'd like to explore today two elements of those deep relationships, honor and trust. So what I mean by honor is the recognition that there's something precious hidden within another person. The leader's job is to mine that gem and create the conditions for the individual to shape and polish the gem. So what is it about each individual member of your team that is great? How do they create the most value? And sometimes our teammates need us as the leaders to be the ones to identify what that gift is, to mine the gem. Often our teammates need our confidence in them in order for them to build confidence in themselves. So when a leader can truly honor what it is that an individual teammate does to contribute to the whole, they build a wonderful level of intimacy with that person that creates a bond of relationship. And the second element of building great relationships is trust. So what is trust? Trust is the security in relationships that results from the willingness to go first. Now, what do I mean by go first? I mean, you as the leader have to be the one to take ownership of behaviors that build trust before anybody else. So the problem with trust is that when most people say trust me, what they mean is you go first. You go ahead and take the risk. Trust me. But when we talk about trust at IGW, we mean, what can I as the leader do to invest in that feeling of certainty in this relationship? How can I risk first? And so what you see on the right side of the slide here is a wonderful model for doing just that. So the trust equation, which was developed by David Maister, a model that I think is very simple, very powerful, and I love, is 4 variables that impact trust. So the variables on the top side of the equation, credibility, reliability, intimacy, the more you have them, the more you build trust. And in the denominator, the bottom part of the equation, the more you have self-orientation, the more you diminish trust. So what's credibility? It means that I know my stuff. If I tell you I'm an expert in something, it's because I really am. The more I really am an expert in something I claim expertise in, the more credibility I build. Reliability means I do what I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it. And intimacy, I think, is the most misunderstood. Intimacy means the feeling of safety to take emotional and intellectual risks. So if I'm really good at creating intimacy, it means that you feel that you can take emotional and intellectual risks without being punished. Now, how do I build that? I build it by letting you take those risks and not only not punishing you, but rewarding you. Self-orientation, I think, is pretty straightforward. It means that if I have low self-orientation, it means that I demonstrate that my agenda for you is for your growth as a professional and for the betterment of the organization and nothing else. So if I have high self-orientation, it means it means that I am diminishing trust. Low self-orientation, it means that I am building trust. So these are 4 variables that we can all take action on in order to invest in the level of trust in our organizations. Now, why is that important? The probabilities increase when trust levels in relationships are higher. What do I mean by the probabilities? I mean the probabilities of developing an autonomous performance culture. This is really key, because if you don't do this, you don't get any scale in leadership. And that's when you as the leader are constantly involved in the day-to-day of the business. Every problem has to be solved by you. Every fire has to be put out by you. And every problem, you just throw bodies and money at it. It's not sustainable over time. So if we look at the bottom of this chart, in a low trust environment, the maximum expectation of team culture is force. Okay, that means that the maximum expectation of a culture of a team is reward and punishment. People are really only going to do what they're rewarded for, and they're only going to not do what they get punished for. The stock and trade is salary. People will only exchange work for money in a low trust environment. And the best people feel fear because they feel like I can't take risks here. And they're constantly looking to cover their mistakes and to jump ship. The problem with that is that the problem with a low trust environment is that the maximum expectation of leadership impact is compliance. Even if you have a phenomenal leader, if you have a low trust environment, the maximum impact they can have is to get people to follow the rules, but they'll never get sacrificed. The more trust you build in your teams, the more trust you build in your organization, the higher the expectations you can have of teams to collaborate, to truly invest. And the stock and trade is legacy, because you're not just talking to them about winning games. You're talking to them about a much, much broader and grander vision. And the grandeur of the vision can only be established and can only be traded upon in a high trust environment. And when you have a high trust environment, the best people are energized because they feel they can take risks. They can be a source of innovation without being punished. They want this organization to be the last stop in their career. And the maximum expectation of leadership impact is inspiration. In a high trust environment, people feel like time has almost stopped. They don't feel the clock ticking. In a low trust environment, it's all they hear is tick, 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 tick the clock. And perhaps the biggest problem of a low trust environment is that they see you, the leader, as an adversary, no matter how profoundly, no matter how profound your leadership capabilities are, they see you as power over, that it's a hierarchy. Whereas in a very high trust environment, they see you as an ally, power with. So this is really important, because if you want this top part of this chart, where you have a very high trust environment and teams want to collaborate and individuals want to sacrifice because they really want to get at that legacy that is enshrined in the vision, then these principles of coaching that we've been talking about, if they're done in concert with one another, they synergize one another. They deliver those extraordinary results in the form of a performance culture. So when you have that expectation of team collaboration, when the stock and trade is legacy, when the best people are so inspired by the vision, by what this organization could become, they're so inspired by a mission that rises above just scoring points on the board. When they really want this to be the last stop on their career journey, and the maximum expectation of leadership impact is that huge level of inspiration, that's when the habits of coaching that we've discussed today can result in a performance culture. So why is that important? Because culture then becomes that force, that kind of unseen hand in an organization that shows everybody this is what's expected. So when you start to model these coaching habits, it's not only a signal to people inside the organization, but it's a signal to even people outside the organization. Wow, these people, this is serious business over there with this mission and vision thing. And so the people who jive with that will be magnetized towards the organization, and people who don't will self-select out. It said that's an incredibly powerful thing when you have such an emphatic performance culture. And not only will the right people be magnetized in, but they'll see by how you've modeled it and by how you've taught others to model the process. They'll know intuitively how to collaborate productively because they'll see their teammates modeling what you've modeled. And not only with colleagues, but also with clients. And so when people who fit, when they jive with the mission and the vision, and they see everyone modeling the way, and so they begin to model that themselves. And that turns into collaborative productivity, productive collaboration. That then drives higher percentile performance for your organization. So you can see that the habits of leadership that we learn from the great coaches of sport are extremely powerful when they are practiced in concert with one another, and when you allow it to have that kind of synergy. So again, when we say leadership, what do we mean? We mean that uniquely human energy that unlocks the will inside of others to actualize a worthy outcome. So as a leader, I really want you to think about, in the next week to month to quarter, how can you develop a mission and a vision that inspire sacrifice? Not just compliance, not even just high performance, but that kind of giving that's beyond reward. How can you provide training not only in skill, but also in self-management, collaboration, and coaching to build autonomy? How can you, as a leader, become a coach who builds leaders who become coaches, who then look around and look for opportunities to coach their colleagues? And finally, how can you invest in the variables that build trust, i.e. the willingness to take intellectual and emotional risks, the security in relationship to have true intimacy, so that people want to innovate, so that they want to give you their best ideas? So if you are interested in exploring further these concepts of the coaching model of leadership, here are 5 resources that I hope will inspire you, that have certainly inspired me. And if you're interested, you can scan the QR code in the corner and drop your email address, and I'll send you a PDF that not only outlines why these 5 resources are so important to my development of these ideas, but also some links on where you can access them yourselves. So thank you again to Leo and to Leading Peers for giving me the opportunity to talk about the coaching model of leadership today. Hope you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions or you want to pursue this conversation further, don't hesitate to reach out. And I wish you all the best of success in all of your endeavors as leaders, and go forth and lead.